Hi, this is Dr. Victoria Nalule, a research fellow at the Extractive Hub based at the Center for Energy, Petroleum, Mineral and Policy at the University of Dundee in the UK. Here with me is Mr. Jozef Masseroli from Sierra Leone, and today he's going to take us through a brief overview of artisanal mining and what the government has done to formalize the sector in Sierra Leone. But before we start on the discussion, I'd like Mr. Jozef to briefly introduce himself, and thereafter he will take us through the formalization process of artisanal mining in Sierra Leone.
Hi, my name is Jozef Masseroli and I'm an economist at the National Minerals Agency in Sierra Leone. I'm employed through the Overseas Development Institute Fellowship Scheme. So the National Minerals Agency is the implementing institution of the mining law in Sierra Leone. Today I'm going to talk about the artisanal sector in Sierra Leone. The artisanal sector is not that important in terms of government revenue. In fact, last year the artisanal sector contributed to only 6% of the mining revenues going to the government. However, the artisanal sector is very important in terms of employment. In fact, it is estimated that over 300,000 people are working in the artisanal sector, which is a great number considering that Sierra Leone has a population of only 7 million. For this reason, the government of Sierra Leone and the NMA are really committed into improving the status quo and put things into action in order to formalize the artisanal sector. It is a very complex task because the artisanal sector is typically informal. It's very difficult to track. Miners move from one side to another, and it's very difficult to track the production because miners are not willing to share their winnings with the government officials. It leads to a very opaque value chain because it's difficult to track the minerals from the mine to the dealers and to the exporters. In Sierra Leone, the main minerals are gold and diamonds, so very easy to smuggle, which leads to a problem with smuggling, especially with gold. In fact, neighboring countries have lower royalty rates, and therefore, even though we don't have an exact figure for the problem I was talking earlier, there is evidence that the great part of the gold mine in Sierra Leone could end up in other countries. Then there is another issue about the organizational arrangements in mining communities. These may vary from mining community to another, but generally there is a supporter that provides daily wages, food, sometimes medicine to the miners, and in exchange the supporter will get most of the winnings for the mining activities. This is a very simplified example, but typically the miners are left in a exploitative relationship with the supporters, and therefore they are trapped in poverty. So the government of Sierra Leone and the NMA are putting some strategies in place in order to formalize the sector, such as the NMA is now strengthening its monitoring capacity. We have hired recently 300 compliance officers that have been trained, have been deployed, and the presence of the compliance officers will ensure that more miners will obtain licenses, and there is scope to obtain more production data as well. Data quality trainings in order to improve the cadastre system have been in place, and these compliance officers will also be subject to performance assessment. Another step of the roadmap is to allocate land specifically to artisanal mining. This will also benefit from a nationwide geophysical survey that is now being carried out, and it will indicate areas that could be eligible for artisanal mining. If we're going to separate artisanal mining from the industrial mining, or at least set some areas for artisanal mining, it will simplify the monitoring role of the NMA. And another area of work for the formalization is to understand what are the financial arrangements between miners and supporters and provide suitable alternatives. For instance, we're looking into a way to facilitate the access to finance for miners so that they can receive microcredit or small loans from financial institutions, and therefore they will not have to rely only on supporters. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Jozef, for that extensive discussion on ASM in Sierra Leone. I had already hosted a gentleman from Ethiopia, and we went through the same thing, and we noticed that formalization of artisanal mining and small-scale mining is one of the key issues on the African continent, and I'm glad that the government of Sierra Leone is also considering to formalize the sector, because at the end of the day, it will be hard for the local communities to benefit from the minerals if the sector is not formalized, and not to mention the social and environmental impacts associated with small-scale mining. So I'll not ask follow-up questions, but I'll give the chance to our viewers to ask you any questions with respect to the formalization of artisanal mining in Sierra Leone. And our viewers, you can feel free to send him an email directly, or you can direct your questions to the Extractive Hub, and we shall always get a response from him. So we want it to be an interactive discussion whereby you can always ask questions, and we shall get our guests to respond to your questions. Again, Jozef, thank you very much for accepting to be interviewed by the Extractive Hub, and we're looking forward to working with you and to collaborating with Sierra Leone with respect to the extractive sector.